Raising a family here in Austin back in those days was hard.
When we tried to speak Spanish in class, they would discipline us and take us to the restroom and wash our mouth out with soap.
The only Mexicano CPA in Austin was me. And people, even Mexican-American businesses, did not want to give me the business.
I started realizing more about discrimination. I started noticing directly at us.
The Chicano movement was instrumental in getting several waves of generations aware of the fact that we had a separate culture.
To give us a sense of direction, to give us a sense of, aquí está nuestra cultura y no nos vamos.
Well, I think it opened my eyes to be able to kind of look at events and say, what's happening here? What is really going on here? But there was a lot of energy, there was a lot of togetherness in trying to work for that effort.
All the participation with the farm workers, Cesar Chavez, the economy furniture strike, led me into the field of public service.
It was just a lot of energy for pride. And I think that's what moved us most, the pride that you have in yourself and your community and your culture. It's a whole new world. It's like opening up a book and having stars and all these beautiful things come out. And you say, wow.
Only by knowing individual contributions can we really, tell the whole story.
In 1938, I went to the first grade at Zavala Elementary School, and it didn't take me long to realize that the only kids in that school were Mexicans. So it was a segregated school.
In Austin, of course, it's totally divided, with I-35, and so Mexican Americans live on the east side of I-35 and south. And this is a total construction on the part of the city council dating back to the 1920s. There's nothing natural about it.
My mother was from Mexico, so she spoke Spanish to us all the time. So I truly was bilingual. I spoke Spanish at home, and when I was at school, the teachers would punish us if we spoke Spanish.
When I went into the first grade at Go Valley Elementary School, I was sent to the principal's office. You'd get swatted with a paddle.
They would discipline us and take us to the restroom and wash our mouth out with soap. Not felt that it was something wrong, but I was too young to know better, to speak up about it.
I decided that if they're gonna attack me because of my speaking Spanish, I wasn't gonna speak. So I didn't speak. I spent 3 years in the first grade.
Palm Elementary, they're on IH-35 and Cesar Chavez, East First back at that time. Old building. I worked there for a while. And they only had electrical plugs, not enough for, let's say, an overhead projector that the teacher used or a tape recorder or whatever electrical devices that a teacher would need. They didn't have air conditioning, so they had to open up the windows. And guess what? The noise of all the cars on IH-35.
When I went there, it looked like a little mini prison. We had to cross Highway 35 every day to get to the school.
It was primarily Mexican-American, although most of our teachers were white. The principal was white.
At that time, I thought, well, maybe people who look like me couldn't be educators.
The Mexican Americans were not included in the desegregation plan originally. Mexican Americans had attended Austin High going way back. But the kids that were going to Austin High prior to the integration plan, they faced a lot of discrimination. They said that the word was, all you Mexicans, you're gonna go to Johnston now. When they opened Johnston. You can go to Austin High, you're gonna go to Johnston. That's your school over there. That's for Mexicans. The stories that came to me came from students who had been there. They weren't talking about hearsay. They had lived it. So it was tough.
I had a whole group of friends, and we were all in the honor system. And when we got to Austin High, we were struggling, and we sat down to talk to each other. And it hit us real quick that we had gotten an inferior education. You know, our A's were probably a C+. And we were finding ourselves having to study really hard and so much just to catch up with the students that were there.
Austin High is kind of where you start seeing the social class differences. I went to school with one of the sons of Governor Conley back then, and you know, all the rich people and so on. So you started having more distinctions.
And at that time, we were also facing the Vietnam War. The dean that I had was constantly encouraging all the students that got in trouble, which were minority students. And he was just basically a recruiter for the Army and basically telling, hey, we don't want you to have any bad record. If you just join the service right now, we'll write the recommendation saying you're a good student and we'll back you up on your recruitment.
My experience there was good as far as learning, up until the time that I found out that I was not on a college track. I had joined this program called the Vocational Office Education, where we learn how to type, how to take shorthand, and the goal was for us to go into office type, secretarial types of careers. If I had stayed working, then I would have missed out on having the requirements so that I could attend college. And so when I found that out, I went to one of my teachers and told him my plan is to discontinue this program because I want to take more coursework that's required for me to go to college so that I can attend college. And he told me, you're making a big mistake. And I was like, college is supposed to be better. And why would he tell me this? And so I just told him, I don't think so. And this is my plan. I did apply during the spring of my senior year.
I attended Johnson High School until I was a senior, and I dropped out. I was being bullied by the coaches and some of the band directors there, and I didn't feel that it was a place for me to continue school there, so I just decided just to try to make it with what I already had learned in school and the vocational courses that I had taken in printing, so I picked up a job as a printer.
So you go over to East Side, you go to school, and they're teaching bricklaying. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not teaching bricklaying in high schools on the West Side. This is obviously, they're not tracking people to colleges on the East Side. They're tracking people to trades. They're tracking people to college on the West Side. I mean, it couldn't be more plain.
After a couple of years there, we decided to organize. And at that time, you were having the Chicano walkouts throughout sort of like the Southwest, was experiencing this movement where students were just upset with how the educational system was working. And so we worked and we organized to do a walkout. And so we went to the auditorium and we demanded to speak to the superintendent, to the principals, and then we had our grievances. And we then began the process of having, meetings to address it. And so there was a lot of changes, and we as the seniors didn't benefit, but we knew from then on the students there would benefit from that particular action that we did there.
In the Austin Independent School District, when you went to achievement levels, the whites, the African Americans, the Hispanics, we were at the bottom. The dropout rate was horrendous. But what happened was that we didn't have any administrators or teachers. When I went to the school board, we had one Mexican American principal at Zavala and 40 teachers. The relationship between teachers and students is very special. And you have to have teachers in the rooms that understand who these kids are. And if they don't, the magic doesn't happen. Ernie Perales had decided to do a study in the community itself to determine what needed to be done. And they came up with this list called the 17 demands. That became my agenda. When I went to the school board, I said, here it is. They want more teachers, they want more principals, they want more bilingual education, they want all those things, that came about.
You had a lot of people now getting, like, they wanted to be educators and they were getting to go to college. And so they was going like, okay, how do we make sure that our educators reflect our community?
They would train the beginning teachers in Title I schools, and then they would, after they were trained 2 or 3 years, they would take the better teachers and move them to West Austin and other parts of Austin and bring us more beginning teachers. And so our children never had the opportunities to work with experienced teachers. More teachers like Modesta, Marilena fought to stay at the East Austin schools.
He said, we need to promote bilingual education, and especially in East Austin, a lot of them were Spanish-speaking students. If we didn't, these kids were gonna suffer because the kids were not ready to take a test in English.
Everybody got signs. We went to the school board, and they got Dr. George Sanchez from the University of Texas to come and score, and so we had to present all this information to the school board. This isn't right. And some of the teachers there, oh, no, we don't need to have them have a new school. You know, they're not gonna take care of it anyway. They're just gonna mess it up like they do everything else, okay? Ooh, that was like putting salt in our wound. I said, well, we're gonna show you. So we got Dr. Sanchez, we got the people mobilized, and Palm School got closed down. And then the other fight was, we wanted it on the east side of IH-35. The location was where the old Salvation Army was, and that's right now where the Sanchez Elementary School is.
Sanchez was one of those special schools where they had a Chicano principal. We had a good, solid bilingual program. That gave us the sense of community. It gives us a sense of culture. So there was an expansion in, you might say, in what we were able to offer.
Every generation has to be an improvement from the next. My parents didn't go to school, but we got to high school. Our children, college. And now I love it that I see so many Latinos getting PhDs. I'm just, you know, I love it when I hear it because I know that it's getting better.
We're not at the point where we can say, well, we're there. We have reached the highest level and we can now do whatever. No. I'm just very happy that things are moving in the right direction.
There's increasingly high expectations being expressed by Mexican Americans, reinforced by the returning veterans from the Second World War who have experienced foxhole democracy. They come back expecting to be treated fairly the way they were treated in the military. They're still facing seemingly unchanging social conditions that we describe in terms of a gap, gaps in political representation.
It was basically a patron system. 2 or 3 guys got together, went to visit with the power brokers, and they established themselves as the patrones. When the World War II veterans came back from the war, they started to change things, but not politically. It was more socially.
Organizations that have been organized before, like the League of United Latin American Citizens, the American GI Forum, become more aggressive in their demands for change. The youth then makes use of these opportunities when they graduate from high schools at a higher rate and then attend colleges at a higher rate and then join the professional ranks in the Mexican American community and the social movement. Many of us joined the community action programs established by Congress during the Johnson administration.
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
We were beginning the war on poverty in Austin. When they heard me talk about my experience and what I was doing and all of that, they said, you're exactly what we need. We need neighborhood centers. We're going to need people to run them and help people get to where they need to go. And in the following year, there were some other programs came about. One of them was called Project Enable, which is where Gonzalo landed. He came to my neighborhood center looking for space, which we gave him.
And we had that office there on what was then East First, later to become Cesar Chavez. John Trevino was a neighborhood center director. Richard Moya was an investigator for legal aid. Well, that's really when we became friends after working the community for several years.
At that time, it was still an at-large system. So, of course, it was very difficult for anybody to win without the approval of the whites from the other side of town.
And actually, that was my first election that I ever got involved in. I learned from scratch what it was like to campaign. We learned how to walk door to door. We learned how to register people. We learned the basics of what it takes to win an election. But we just came up a little short on some votes. That didn't stop us. That was just the first step.
This was happening here in Austin, and many things were happening throughout the country. It was our time. And they said the sleeping giant has awakened.
The 4 precincts were not evenly divided among population. So when the courts ruled that you had to have equal one man, one vote, out of that came the expansion of precinct 4. I remember Moya telling me one day, hey, now we have a chance. We have a larger number of voters, Hispanic voters in this precinct, and if we can get a few Anglos, maybe a few blacks, we have at least a chance.
That was a period of time when Mexican Americans were starting to feel empowerment in all angles of the community: politics, community organizing, community leadership, youth leadership, student power. All of these things were at a height in 1970.
So it was grassroots campaign. John Trevino was my campaign manager. He quit his job with about 5 kids and came to run my campaign for nothing. I didn't have any money to pay anybody. I was a printer, right? I went and bought a secondhand beat up offset press, and we just did our own printing. And so every weekend, we had a lot of volunteers, a lot of kids. Dan Ruiz rounded up the volunteers from Salvation Army, and we would print a flyer every week, a different colored paper, and we just flooded the neighborhood.
That printing machine led to what some people term the brown machine. I forget who it was. Hey, there comes the brown machine, Moya, Barrientos, and Trevino. So we let it go. Está bueno, brown machine.
We had pachangas at Zaragoza Park where we had hundreds of people there, and it was all the same thing. Free beer and sausage traps. That was the deal. And people showed up. We don't know how many of them actually were registered to vote because we didn't check, but we encouraged them to register to vote as a hand. And some people told us that they had never voted. They've been registered to vote maybe 20 years, but they never voted.
For me, it was a kind of the opening of doors of actually of what political activism was, and having also the experience of going into the community, door to door, voter registration, engaging people in conversation about why it was important to vote, and having this discussion, in the different barrios.
Me and Paul Tovar ran against the incumbent. We'd been there for 21 years, and they didn't think we could win, but I did win. And the way I won was because these guys like Gonzalo and John and a lot of others worked real hard to make sure that we turned out to vote.
While the Mexican American vote could not by itself elect someone countywide, we therefore set up coalitions. African Americans, Mexican Americans, labor, students, environmentalists. We all kind of needed each other during those years.
We rallied around him, and it wasn't an easy campaign. There was a lot of resistance from the white establishment to have someone like Richard Moya running for an important position of county commissioner. But this was something that we were able to do to rally people and educate them about our right to register and vote, and use that as a means of speaking out on our own behalf.
And we got tremendous turnout, and I thought all of a sudden our constituents felt like, yeah, we can win these things. Where before, it's not what you're running for, you can't win anyway.
Richard Moya's campaign actually was a catalyst for getting a lot of this action going throughout the community. And a lot of political leadership developed from that.
When you're running for office, you got to go door to door, especially if you don't have the money for television, etc. One of the first doors I hit on the west side of Austin, I knocked on the door, and this guy comes out, and I said, "Hello, my name's Gonzalo Barrientos, and I'm running for state representative in place 4. He said, "Get out of here. I ain't gonna vote for no damn Mexican." Slams the door. It kind of hurts your feelings. But you got to go to the next door. So I knocked on a lot of doors, lost about 10 to 20 pounds, and finally got there.
They made some bumper stickers, and they said, "Who is Gonzalo Barrientos?" And I stuck those all over the place. You know, I had them in my purse, on my hippie purse. I just stuck them all over.
I lost the first race. John Trevino lost the first race. He ran again in the second time. We both won.
John Trevino was the first Mexican American to be elected to the city council, and I was there the night he was elected. That was such a big deal. The city council was elected at large, and so it's difficult for minorities particularly to get on the city council.
Activists in East Austin were starting to organize, especially to begin to identify Mexican-American candidates who would represent East Austin in local politics. The political activity, by the way, led to some of those folks then becoming very active in the Raza Unida party that Jose Angel Gutierrez and others were starting around the state of Texas. But there was local Raza Unida participation in that too.
We wanted to use these campaigns for state office as a way to promote change or improved representation of Mexican Americans in the Democratic Party.
The enthusiasm that came forth out of that was primarily out of the gubernatorial campaign. Ramsey Muniz was the candidate, and the charisma that he possessed.
Everywhere we go, a donde vamos, our people are awakening and their eyes are opening.
The Raza Unida Party was something that gave people a lot of hope, and it educated a lot of people of their rights to vote and the importance of voting and how people who cared about community and who looked like us could actually get into political power and make changes.
The split between those that went to Democrats and Raza Unida, we were friendly, but we didn't think the same. You know, we had two different points of view politically. And two, it was all men. Margaret Gomez was really one of the few, to run, but most of them were men. In Raza Unida, you'd look at any platform and it would be at least half women, and in some cases more women.
We all are walking toward the same goal. It's just different paths. And sometimes we do differ. Sometimes we run against each other.
The Democratic Party started reacting to what we were doing and, like I say, opening up more, which attracted more raza. Our people wanted to have a feeling of belonging, and if that acceptance was there, they were going to be part of that. To this day, I still consider myself Raza Unida, and even though I might vote Democrat, in my heart, I'm still Raza Unida.
The party didn't do very well in the 78 elections. They were very impressive with their voting results in 72 and 74, but not in 78. It dissolved also because of very serious attempts to undermine the party. These attempts involved law enforcement officials who brought drug charges against some of our candidates. Some of those cases may have been justified. In some cases, the charges were not. So it dissolved.
We repeat mistakes, we repeat agendas, but the thing is, the struggle goes on. Seguimos en la lucha.
You look back now, and for where we started and where we are now, now any young man or young woman that wants to be whatever, they can do it now. It's there. Now what are you going to do with it? We opened the door for you. Now what are you going to do with it?
Most of the organizations that appear very prominently during the late 60s and early 70s come from Texas. The League of United Latin American Citizens formed in 29, the American GI Forum formed in 47, the student organizations, and then later MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and others they originate in Texas. Most historians like to point to the farm worker strikes of the late 60s and early 70s as an important energizing element in this growing movement. There are many other things that occur before that and after that, but that is one very important marker, the organizing efforts by farm workers to strike for improved conditions and boycotts that allowed people outside the Mexican-American community to bring pressure on the farmers to sit down at the bargaining table with the farm workers.
We helped in asking, particularly near campus, the liquor stores that were here, and asked them to take down the Gallo wines. Those are the ones that the United Farm Workers were boycotting if they would, do it voluntarily. And if they didn't, then we told them that we were going to demonstrate in front of their business. This was connected with Cesar Chavez's boycott on grapes.
The walkouts of the late 60s and early 70s are also another very important marker. The anti-war movement as well. We had a number of demonstrations that allow us to join with other communities.
The economy strike got a lot of people together, people that had never been involved. I tell a story about my mom. I never dreamed that my mother, because she was kind of laid back, that she would ever get involved in anything. But there's the economy strike, and I marched down Congress Avenue, and there goes my mom, which, I said, look at this, man. And everybody got involved, because the economy strike was a big injustice to Mexican-American workers, without a doubt.
The economy furniture was North Austin. I mean, back in those days, it might as well have been Waco.
About 90-something% were Mexicanos working there, Chicanos.
There were a lot of friends of Buddy's in that place. Lencho and Leo, all of them were working there. Buddy's brother, Buddy's father, they were all working in there. Buddy and we were living at his parents' house here on 3rd and Waller. And my father-in-law would tell him, fíjate que so-and-so, who has been working here for 25 years or 30 years, they fired him because they didn't want to pay him his pension. I mean, that just was not right.
But when I heard about their low wages and discrimination and the way that the setting where they work was set up,
the most important was the disrespect that the company had for us. The fact that they would not promote our people, the wages that they paid us, and the way they treated us on a daily basis.
Well, I think it opened my eyes to be able to kind of look at events and say, what's happening here? What is really going on here? And it was pretty clear with the economy furniture strike, it was about not paying people appropriately for the work that they do. And they wanted to also form a union. There were all these efforts on the part of the owners to not let that union occur. And it kind of makes you wonder, but that's the right that people have.
Buddy knew that you had to unionize. You have to all stick together. If we all stick together, the power of the people is quite potent.
And they refused to negotiate, so then we took a vote to strike because we felt like that they were not going to recognize the union. So we decided to go ahead and vote for the strike, and it was overwhelmingly in favor of going out on strike, and we did.
It was not even, maybe a week or so when they all said, okay, we're gonna walk out, and my father-in-law, he walked out with them, and his brothers walked out with them, and my father-in-law became totally committed to the cause. All of a sudden he says, you're so right, we cannot allow them to treat us this way. I'm sick and tired of it. So he became a big spokesman, and they all walked out, and it was hard because, no income, and how are they gonna feed their families?
I photographed the pickets, they're walking up and down the street, and they had a striker's shack, this galvanized building that they worked out of.
We would change pickets, and they would their rest while they were waiting for to relieve other picketers. We maintained a picket line for the duration of the strike.
One Saturday, my dad told me they're going to have a protest, a march against what's happening at the Economy Furniture, and it's going to be downtown. He didn't work at the Economy Furniture, but he had relationships with others.
They had a march in Austin on Congress Avenue. And at that time, we had a Mayo chapter that wore brown berets. We were a brown beret group, but was a Mexican-American youth organization, Mayo. And we brought a busload to join them over here. And that's how we met people like Lencho and Leo Hernandez.
So I participated in the march, and I was really blown by it because I saw so much raza. Like, I was going like, wow, que raza is really upset about what's going on, and they're together, and they're taking a march, and everywhere I look, I could just see everybody who looked like me, but people who were standing up for their rights, right? They were taking these actions and so forth. And so I just felt really proud, and I was really happy to be there with my dad. And being there, was an inspiration for me to really continue, advocating against injustices.
It was a very, very beautiful experience for me to see because Cesar Chavez even came to support them. I even had the honor of taking a photo with him and one of the women leaders. We even went to the Capitol and took a photo with the men leaders against a glimpse that talked about civil rights.
And I remember Cesar Chavez coming to the Montaples community. I thought it was such a big honor to have Cesar Chavez here. Their relationships were more about with the relationship he had with economy workers and that group of people, even though we were the broader community. What an honor it was, again, to see someone working for the workers' rights who understood it.
We said to ourselves, that strike is going to be won. In fact, it already has been won because the people there are willing to pay the price and also a lot of hard work. They're setting the stage for wide organizations, labor organizations among the Chicanos, not only in Texas, but in many other states around Texas.
Oh gosh, it was just overwhelming. And I couldn't believe that he was here. I couldn't believe that I was seeing the person.
That strike got settled about 72, but at that time they were totally unemployed. But they gave a lot of their time, man. And they put up all the signs, they made them, they put them up, they kept an eye on them, and they walked, and they were an army.
The workers voted in National Labor Relations Board election for representation by the Upholsterers International Union of North America, AFL-CIO. We voted to have them represent us in collective bargaining.
There were a lot of marches, and there were large numbers of people involved. And there was a lot of energy. And a lot of flyers were given out door to door and to stores, and everybody was doing that. East Austin, South Austin as well. But there was a lot of energy, and there was a lot of togetherness in trying to work for that effort.
We had, certain experiences that were not necessarily meant to make us proud of our heritage, because they try to make us ashamed of ourselves by not letting us, for example, speak Spanish.
My mother raised us speaking English. She wanted us to be competitive in school, and even though we were exposed to Spanish, people that were primarily Spanish speakers kind of looked down on us because we couldn't speak the language. Of course, in school, we got it from the white kids because we were Mexican, so it just raised havoc with our psychology and that kind of a thing. So we grew up pretty confused.
Tacos, another thing, people sometimes would pack tacos and take them to school for lunch, and they actually made you ashamed of that.
Even at that level, they're trying to erase our culture and say assimilate, acculturate. In Spanish, even much less the indigenous languages, which we, in a lot of ways, lost, right? But they don't teach us a true history of who we are.
We weren't allowed to listen to our music, so, some people, it was fine. I mean, they taught us, so that's life, But for some reason or other, for me, it wasn't all right. It wasn't. I didn't like the feeling that I couldn't be proud of who I was, that my language and my music. Culturally, nada aquí para nosotros, nothing.
culture in the schools, society made me feel ashamed of playing the accordion, that it was inferior music.
By the time the Chicano movement came around, I was beginning to have some idea of what our heritage was.
The name Chicano was a way to identify ourselves because we weren't Mexican citizens, we weren't Spaniards, we were Chicanos, Mexican Americans, and we gave ourselves the name. The word Chicano was a name of resistance, a name of defiance, a name of self-identity. This is who we became. This is what we were establishing during the late 60s and the early 70s was self-identity, self-determination.
The term Chicano is used primarily by the group of people that become very socially conscious, that make socially conscious decisions to join the social movement for the betterment of the community. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have a new Mexican-American cultural type. Yes, we've Americanized, but to a great extent, we've Americanized on our own terms, not only in ethnic terms, but in broad cultural terms.
The Chicano cultural renaissance of that time, of the 60s into the 70s, all of that was happening at that time, poetry, readings, music, festivals, murals, it was exciting times. The Chicanos that were there in Austin, man, at the university and the Barrio, we were turned on, man. And we formed CASA, Chicano Art Students Association, and we began doing sort of events, collaborative events there at the university and started hooking up with the Barrio.
Here, one might mention, for example, Cynthia and Lydia Perez, who were in the student movement here on the campus and decided to make Austin their home, started Las Manitas restaurant, La Peña, the arts complex downtown. They became a very important locus, and still are, of the arts particularly.
Maria Salinas was the director of the Ballet Folclórico Aztlán de Texas.
He was the one that really got us involved with a sort of danza azteca. We met Andrés Segura, who's the Capitán General de la Danza in Mexico City, and connected with him and did our first ceremonies in Mexico. The arts were exploding all across the nation, and I brought back my accordion, that I hadn't played since I was young, and then formed the Conjunto Aztlán, a conjunto del movimiento chicano. Playing protest music and incorporating poetry, and we were danzantes there, traditional Mexica Azteca, Conchero Aztec. This whole move going back to our indigenous roots and our indigenous spirituality. And then Conjunto de Acordeón Bajo Sexto, but protest music, man. We usually played music in the marchas too, and sang.
We were marching down the street and I was playing the guitar and we were singing some of the songs from the Movimiento. As we were walking down the street, there was a garage sale right in front of us and we were walking right by it, and he noticed there was an accordion there, a black accordion. And he went over there and picked it up, and I didn't even know he played. Messed with it a little bit and bought it, and came back in the march and we kept going, and we played guitar and accordion from then on.
A lot of the conjuntos and orquestas that were forming up at that time, a lot of those activities were also in East Austin. Little Joe particularly was very important in that, and others as well.
La luna grande y redonda como un círculo hermético.
We organized Floricanto 2 Poetry and Arts Festival. Floricanto comes from Isochirincuicat, Nahuatl, flower and song, Floricanto. Mainly a literary festival, but there was all of the arts were represented one way or another.
The Floricanto activity begins in California, of course, but eventually we did have one here in Austin. A number of poets and writers from across the country came to Austin. Some of them came to Austin for the very first time in their lives.
Some of my next poems have to do with my family and coming out, being gay. That was not an easy thing for my family to accept. In fact, it's been a struggle ever since I came out.
So that was another very important facet of the student activity here, that it integrated UT and Austin and the greater Austin community with a national network of artists and intellectuals and filmmakers as well.
When we started Mujeres Artistas del Sudoeste in 79, we decided that what we wanted to do in order to give direction to where we wanted the arts to go, that we needed to have an intercambio.
I remember we had La Plástica Chicana. That was an interesting thing. We brought people from all over the place. You know, it was an encuentro or a gathering of a lot of artists from Mexico City. And then we brought people from California, from Chicago, El Paso, all over Texas. There were filmmakers and photographers, painters, of course, muralists, art historians.
And we had about 30 sessions on like the different artists would give. We had the Triato at the Pan American Recreation Center. We had the Conjunto Aztlán. They played the Pachanga at the Zaragoza Park.
It was groundbreaking to have people, come in and get to know Austin, and as well as us getting to know them.
So I was very, very glad that we had this conference. I think the significance of this for us meant that we needed to bring this together to give us the power that we needed, to give us a sense of direction, to give us a sense of aquí está nuestra cultura y no nos vamos.
Pues que representa muchas cosas. Para diferentes gentes, it, represents different things.
So one of the things that we did during that period of time was to paint murals around the East Austin community. Well, we needed an artist to be able to do that. Raul Valdez, who was our community artist, a celeb, was the one that spearheaded and led a group that started painting one mural at a time in the East Side. And one of the most renowned murals that Raul Valdez did was at the Pan Am Recreation Center.
I had identified my goals as far as art went, and I wanted to make cultural, political statements, and I wanted to take art to the public, and I had the idea that, why do you want to hide your art in a gallery? Take it to the streets. I wanted to do real public art, and I wanted to do art that people were a part of, that belonged to the people, So the first thing I did was make a list, and get everybody to sign their names and give me the subject matter that they were interested in seeing produced in this mural. And then I got people from the community, some kids mostly, and some other volunteers came by and helped out. So I kind of liked that model, and I continued it on.
His art was barrio art. His art made a statement about our community, about resistance, about defiance, about history, about culture. All of these things that we probably would have had taken too many words to convey, where art made it much easier for us to do. And that's what Raul Valdez represented for us.
We had a center at the Juarez Lincoln University, which is right there on Cesar Chavez Boulevard there at 35. I knew people that taught there, including Jose Flores, who played with Conjunto Aztlán, was the jefe. He used to teach there. He started there.
It was sold, and of course, the first thing they do is they're going to destroy it.
I think the whole significance of it is that the community has accepted it as being part of the community and belonging to them, which was the intention in the first place.
And Raul Valdez painted a mural there that then they tore down. After that, we protested that.
They knocked the mural first, and they hit the lady right in the face. They weren't going for architectural integrity or the destruction thereof. They were hitting the lady in the face. They were hitting the mural. They were thinking about the mural, and so were the people. And somebody almost got seriously hurt trying to keep it from falling when they knocked it down. Alurista Amado Peña and Inés Hernandez Tovar, this guy named JP, and myself got together for a meeting and talked about doing a multidisciplinary cultural group, an organization. and work as one entity, you know. And Alurista came up with the name League of United Chicano Artists.
Throughout the years, we would just showcase the art of different artists from the neighborhood. These were artists that may not have gotten an opportunity to do so anywhere else in the, in the at-large cultural arts organizations. We used to offer classes, and Jose Flores taught literatura chicana and poetry.
Pedazo de movimiento, cercas de conciencia forman tu cuatro, lunas y estrellas tu población, mi espíritu te conoce, mi alma te recoge.
Raúl Salinas would also do the poesía and literatura.
Lucha was established to give voice to the need for a cultural arts center like the MAC.
And so this was a dream. This was the seed, and it started with Emma and I and Mrs. Limon and Mrs. Salinas, all these mothers that wanted a place so our culture, our poems, our music, our art could be enjoyed.
For me, it is so important to include a lot of the artists who spearheaded to have a space like this, who fought for these rights.
It's impossible to be proud when you don't know who you are. We have a center here that we can continue to promote that culture.
Poco a poco, raza, poco a poco se va muy lejos, you know.
Poco a poco se va muy lejos. Yo les digo, mis amigos oyen tus consejos. Poco a poco se va muy lejos.